Plato's cave is itself a myth. The myth of Plato's cave. The myth of the allegory. It's a mistake, a myth. Unfortunately, it's been around for millennia. It's a tradition we should get rid of. We still need to study it. It shouldn't be accepted as true in the culture. Read Plato, study Plato. Plato is a genius, a lot worth thinking about. But we should, very important. And then it's a root to a lot of things in our modern world. Not always a good root. If you look, Plato, the Republic, and you see that people have been influenced by him, and there have been some bad results. He wrote he wrote a blueprint for the totalitarian government in the Republic, and that's been a blueprint for totalitarian governments. The Nazis, the fascists, the communists, medieval Europe, the monarchs then. We need to understand the cause of something, where it comes from. And he was a genius. He asked great questions, but wrong. So it was misleading, and it's a myth because he got people thinking that the evidence of the senses is not where truth is. All these people know what truth is. They're there. And then he gets them looking somewhere else. He gets them confused. It's like a magic trick or like a squirrel. He's a magician. He's doing something. People don't notice what's going on. And then something disappears. Or he pulls something out of a hat. But in the allegory, people are chained and they see shadows. And that's like what experience would be. But that's nonsense. When people have evidence of the senses and experience, they got the real. They are in the light. Now they need to start applying conceptual thinking, go above having a good interpretation of Plato's divided line, go above the divided line. Don't be non-conceptual. Think and process. Then you get more out of it and you got wisdom for the real world. Plato had the myth that some idea in our heads was the truth. So experience was full of illusions and lies and delusions. You couldn't trust it. It misled you. If you were caught up in experience, you would not be able to do science or philosophy or know what the truth is. You would turn away from experience. Nonsense, as modern science has shown. What did Galileo and Newton and William Harvey and Marie Curie and Maria Montessori and others do? They immersed themselves in experience, as Aristotle said. Aristotle got it right to some extent. He made some mistakes too, but Plato thought there was this essence, this pure form we had to turn to, and then we'd know what the truth is. Aristotle got that right. He knew, bam, the allegory was wrong. It's inexperience where we have the standard for all conceptual truth. That's where the thing that we're all aware of, that we know, so we can communicate and we can build conceptual knowledge and do science, as modern scientists, good ones, do. And as the ones that really know good philosophy of science, know. But Aristotle thought, he kind of got Plato's concept and put essence in things, which is kind of where it is. That's correcting the myth of Plato's cave. It shows that it's a myth. There's a myth in the myth. In things is where the essence is, but not really. Essence is conceptual, not metaphysical. That's a thing that had to be figured out later in philosophy and logic, kind of more recently. Some good development. And you can see, like, talking about Aristotle and modern interpretations, like James Lennox, Alan Gotthelf, and some others do a good job on that. World-renowned scholars. But knowing the so-called shadows of Plato is knowing, when you process it right, the truth and putting you in the light. It is not a shadow. Going into Plato's sunlight is going into darkness and shadow and delusion, making things up. What does a crazy person do? They're not connected to the evidence of the senses and experience. They don't communicate to us with it. They can't think. all these things are going on in their head. They're like a extreme, mistaken, unfortunate, sad exemplification of Plato. You could look at it that way, or Immanuel Kant. But that's how it's a myth. You look at how we really know knowledge. What is really science? What do people really do? What do we do as humans? Stop to be like a scientist or detective and investigate that. Then you see that the so-called shadows are the solid truth. Plato mistook the solid for the unreal. But if you, as I say, be like a scientist or detective, you will see that. Be a scientist about science, or a scientist about thinking. Not like Plato, where whoa. I shall hold on to it this time. Don't be like Plato, where you think that your adult context is suddenly where things are. It comes out of nowhere. There's no development. No, you got to think, how do we get to this point? What knowledge built up to this point? That's kind of what Aristotle got and later people. You got to see we start with the evidence of the senses, and we build up, we climb a ladder to higher and higher truths, to more and more abstractions. This is the real level, and then we can dig down narrowly, kind of like what's going on at smaller levels to the atomic level, go to abstractions that way, or go to abstractions that are like astronomical, but they're both related to this. It's not like, remember, we've got to think epistemological. The evidence of the senses is a starting point. It's not like atomic level is. We don't know it right away. We don't start with that. We start with the evidence of the senses. That's the real. That's what we should be seeing at the end in Plato's allegory, if you got it right. We start with that. We get more and more abstract things. We start with solid objects. We can eventually get to the atomic theory. We start with things. We can eventually see what's going on in the solar system and beyond. Things like that. It starts with what we see that is real. The real is there. And I'll put some quotes about Galileo's thinking on that I've shared before. Could be new to someone, so I'll put them there. But, and some things about Plato's allegory of the cave. But there is kind of what's really going on. The myth of Plato's cave, or the myth of the allegory of Plato's cave. It is a myth. It is false. That what we see is an illusion and less real, whereas some idea we make up in our head is more real. Things should be related to this. As Abraham Lincoln did, he didn't relate things to some airy-fairy idea. He looked at the real world. What was going on to make someone guilty or innocent? Like, one case is discussed in Abraham Lincoln and the Structure of Reason, where there was some boat hit a bridge, and he went out and investigated that really well. Or what does Sherlock Holmes do? He doesn't make crap up in his head. He has investigated the hell out of things before he goes into a case. And if he finds he has more to learn, then he starts from scratch and builds his way up again to get these concepts which he can use to deduce. Gets abstractions, but that's where it goes. So Sherlock, Abraham Lincoln come from an Aristotelian tradition of seeing that the real is rooted in the evidence of the senses. It is not an illusion. So let's please take that to heart. Get rid of this and recognize that the allegory of Plato's cave is a myth. Let's get things right so we can be real. We can deal with each other better, have science done right, have education done right. Peace.